Are you tired of schedule delays and having difficult conversations with your clients about those delays, about mistakes, things that slip through the cracks on your construction projects? Do you wake up at night worried about project details? Did we order this? Did we get this change order in? Are you frustrated by clients and architects being slow about making decisions and then changing their mind, and then you have to keep up with this tornado of changes? Is your bottom line taking a hit from the scope gaps and the profit bleeds and the estimating misses and the schedule delays? What if you could start every project knowing exactly what's going to be built, exactly how much it's going to cost? What if you could package up a job and hand it off to your field team so they could run with it and have everything they need? Well, there's a hidden problem that needs to be solved first, and there's a big gap. There's a missing phase of every project that needs to be designed. This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast, where it's all about helping construction business owners eliminate chaos, maximize profit, and reclaim your freedom. My name is Todd, and my team and I have helped over 400 construction companies eliminate chaos, grow their profits, and grow their team. And here are 3 questions you'll get answered in this episode. Number 1, what is that hidden problem that keeps you stuck in firefighting mode? I'll give you a hint. It's in your brain. Number 2, what is that missing phase of every project? What I call the secret profit phase. And then number 3, how do you design the process for that missing phase and do it in a way that your team will actually follow it? Well, whether you're building projects with 7-figure contracts that last 2 years or 5-figure projects that last a few days or a few weeks, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to set them up for success and eliminate 80% of the chaos and the profit bleeds that you're dealing with. As a bonus, I'll also share a couple of chaos elimination hacks to include in your process that I've picked up after managing over $300 million worth of construction projects over the past 25 years. And so be sure to stick around until the end to hear those chaos elimination hacks. A while back, I had a call with a commercial general contractor, with the owner and the operations leader, and they shared some of the challenges that they were dealing with, some of the things they were frustrated about, like details were falling through the cracks. There were breakdowns in communication with their superintendents, internally and externally. Things were getting missed. There were schedule delays. They had projects that were running 2 to 3 months late. The operations leader was spending a lot of time putting out fires, constantly reminding PMs and superintendents to do things, constantly checking in with them, also fielding uncomfortable calls from clients about those delays and about mistakes and pay applications. And as we dug into it, I asked about their handoff process. How do they hand off projects from the office to the field? And that's when one of the root causes of their problems came out, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And what they were doing is very consistent with what I see a lot of people doing. They were signing projects with allowances, with plug numbers, vague or incomplete scopes of work. They were starting projects with incomplete specs and selections, saying things like, hey, they can pick out their fixtures, their flooring, their cabinets as we go along. Let's get started, and we'll pick out that other stuff as we go along. They were also buying out the project as they go, which is required. You have to wait until you get the selections to buy it. So that meant they were selecting subcontractors and suppliers after they started the project, as they went along. In a nutshell, they were starting projects without knowing exactly what was going to be built and knowing how much it would cost. When I asked the owner of this commercial general contracting firm, hey, tell me about your handoff process from estimating to operations, they said, we basically hand them a set of plans and we say, go build it. We call the superintendent in. We say, here's a set of plans, go build it. That was the handoff process. Why do people do this? This is very common. Is there a deeper issue? Well, at one of our live events in Naples, Florida, a few months ago, one of our clients said something to the effect of, Todd, I want to plan ahead. I want to think strategically, but it seems like I can only get stuff done when my back's against the wall. I can only get stuff done when there's a deadline. I can only get stuff done when there's a crisis, right? And if you're like a lot of people, you could probably pull a rabbit out of your hat when you need to. Think about the last crisis that you dealt with. You had to get something done, and you did. But there's a flip side. There's it's a double-edged sword. So I asked ChatGPT a question. Asked it an interesting question, and it came back with an answer that's probably going to sting a little bit. This one may hurt a little bit. Here's the question I asked. I said, is there a term for people who can only get things done when it's urgent? In other words, things have to be an emergency. Things have to be a fire in order for them to take action. And here's what ChatGPT told me. The term you're describing is often referred to as crisis-driven or firefighter mode behavior. People with this tendency may procrastinate until situations become urgent, at which they experience a surge in motivation to solve the problem. In psychology, this could be related to, quote, urgency addiction, where individuals delay action until the pressure of a deadline triggers a stress response that boosts productivity. This is often linked to time management issues or adrenaline-driven performance. I'm going to read that again. Psychologists would call this urgency addiction. This is where you delay action until the pressure of a deadline or a crisis or a fire triggers a stress response that boosts productivity. So the hidden problem here that has to be dealt with is urgency addiction. If you are like most, not most necessarily, but a lot, and I've spoken with 800 or 1,000 construction business owners over the past 10 years, and I would say many of them, a lot, deal with urgency addiction, and it's a hidden problem. And if you suffer from this urgency addiction, it's going to be really difficult for you to set your projects up for success because in a way you like the fires. You may even be the firefighter who is the arsonist, so to speak. So the hidden problem here is urgency addiction. Think about it. When there's a crisis, you could probably make things happen, right? Think about a time you had to make payroll. You had to get a project across the finish line. You had to get the deal signed. Maybe going back to school, you stayed up all night to get the paper or get that presentation done. If that's the case, chances are your brain requires urgency to get stuff done. You may say things like, we don't need to worry about that right now. We'll figure that out later. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. We just need to get started, and we'll figure out the other stuff later. Any of that sound familiar? If so, you're not alone. But the question is, how do I solve this? My brain is actively working against me. It's addicted to urgency. It seems to require things to be on fire before I do anything. So what do? We'll get back to the show in just a second. If you're a construction business owner, let me ask you this. Are you feeling trapped in your business? Maybe you can't take a real vacation without being on call 24/7. Or when you finally do step away, you know there's going to be a mess waiting for you to clean up when you get back. Or maybe the constant stress of putting out fires and carrying all the responsibility and making all the decisions is keeping you up at night. And you're worried about losing a good employee, or it's affecting your health, or worse, it's keeping you from being present with your family. What if instead you could finally step back from the day-to-day chaos, take back control of your time, and build a business that runs profitably and smoothly, even when you're not there? If that sounds good, I'd like to invite you to book a free business evaluation call with my team. In just one call, we'll help you get crystal clear on 3 things: the root cause of the biggest problems in your business, the goals and vision you want to achieve for your company and your life, and we'll map out a personalized roadmap you can follow to make that vision a reality. Look, we've helped hundreds of construction business owners systematize their business so they can work less, earn more, and actually enjoy their lives. And we can help you too. But the first step, it's up to you. Head over to constructionleadingedge.com/apply to book your free call, or just click the link in the show notes. Don't wait until it's too late. Take the first step toward freedom today. All right, let's get back to the show. Well, I was in Cape Canaveral, Florida, back in March of 2024. And Cape Canaveral is the Space Coast. Okay, this is where the SpaceX rockets launched, where NASA is. And I was there spending a couple of days with a client, and I went to a local restaurant, sat at the bar for dinner, and a lady sat down next to me, and we started chatting, and I asked her what sort of work she did, and she told me that she worked at the JPL, and I didn't know what that meant. And she went on to explain that this is the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, and she was there doing some testing, and she was working on a mission to launch a spacecraft to study one of the moons of Jupiter, okay? It's the Europa Clipper, which actually launched in October of 2024. So she couldn't say to her teammates, hey guys, this ain't rocket science, because it actually is rocket science. She is a true rocket scientist. And I was fascinated by this project, this Europa Clipper project, and she told me how they had spent 10 years planning this project. It had a $5 billion budget. So think what you want about spending $5 billion of taxpayer money to go study the moon of Jupiter. But I asked her about what's this like? What an interesting project. What is the planning? What does the testing look like? And I asked her a question. I said, so once you launch this rocket, what changes can you make? Like, if something goes wrong, what can you do? And she said, we can make a few software updates. That's about it. And I thought, what if a construction project launch was more like a rocket launch? What if we approached it as if, okay, once we launch this project, we can't touch it. It has to be fully developed. We have to have every detail finalized. We have to have every contingency planned for. What if we approached construction projects that way? What if we approached construction projects more like a bank robbery? If you've ever watched Ocean's 11 or any of the Ocean's movies, they spend weeks or months planning this bank robbery. What if we approached construction projects instead of thinking, well, let's just do the urgent stuff and we'll figure the rest of it out as we go? What if we planned it more like a rocket launch or a bank robbery? Well, the reality is that's how the big construction companies do it. Okay. I've had the opportunity to work with some really large commercial general contractors in all over the country, managed projects in Toronto, Arkansas, Ohio, Kentucky. And I've worked for companies like Procter & Gamble, Jones Lang LaSalle, Duke Energy, and worked with companies doing $1 billion in revenue, construction companies doing $1 billion in revenue a year. And the big companies obsess over a specific phase of a project that most small companies completely ignore. Especially, seems like small companies, and especially in the residential sector, they completely ignore this phase of every project, and it's the pre-construction phase. It's the phase that happens pre-construction. Now, I talk a lot about pre-construction in our webinars and talk about the just enough to start trap, which I don't want to get into because I cover that in a lot of other podcast episodes and webinars. But what I want to give you now is, you may be wondering, well, how do I design my pre-construction phase? What does a pre-construction process look like? Well, I want to walk you through the first couple of steps to develop your own pre-construction process. So if you have a team, we'll talk about that. If you don't have a team, you can go through this process yourself, alone. And I highly recommend you do this, whether you have a team or whether you don't, so that you can begin to have a pre-construction process. So the first step is to identify the problems that need to be solved in your pre-construction process. So if you have a team, get your team together and ask 3 questions. If you don't have a team, ask yourself these 3 questions. Where do you most often find yourself getting stuck looking for information or feeling like you don't have what you need? Second question is, what are some things that seem to get forgotten about until the last minute? For example, permits, getting approved submittals. Example would be, well, we get the tiles selected. We always have a tile selection, but we don't have the grout color. We don't have the grout thickness. We don't have the layout. We don't have the Schluter trim details, and we're always scrambling to get that stuff. That's the second question. What are some things that tend to get forgotten about until the last minute? And then number 3, very important question. What is the number 1 area of chronic chaos you want to eliminate in your day-to-day job first? Share these questions with your team separately, ask them to think about it and come up with answers. Now, you'll notice a few things here. These are open-ended questions. We're not asking yes or no questions. Yes or no questions don't help. We want to use open-ended questions. You'll also notice we're not assuming that we know the problems. We're going into this thinking we don't really know what the problems are. So you ask open-ended questions. Number 3, you'll also notice that we're involving the team. Huge problem here, a huge pitfall, mistake people make is to think, I don't need to bother my team with this stuff. They're busy. They're dealing with fires. It's chaotic. I'll figure this out on my own. I'll go into my fortress of solitude and I will come out with this process and I'll hand it to the team. They'll love me for it. I can tell you, if you try that, maybe it'll work. There's a 90% chance it won't. What I've seen is your team will actively resist it because 1, they weren't part of developing the process, or 2, it doesn't actually solve the real problems. So resist the urge to go do this thing yourself. You need to involve your people with finding the problems. So first step is figure out what are the problems by asking your team. Again, if you don't have a team, ask yourself. Think about what are the problems we need to solve. Step number 2 is to have a team session to design your pre-construction process. You need to get your team together after they've answered these questions. And we call this in our Systematize Your Construction Business program, the Nail the Handoff team session. We think about the handoff from pre-construction to construction like a relay race. And there's a handoff of a baton. We're going to hand off the information, the accountability, the communication, everything they need from pre-construction to construction. So quick overview of what this team Nail the Handoff session looks like. Start off by asking your team to share their answers to the Nail the Handoff prep questions you just gave them, those 3 questions. Get consensus from the group on what are the big problems we need to solve. And then have a stack of Post-it notes and a Sharpie or 2 available. Have some wall space or a big table that you can slap Post-it notes on. Take the first Post-it note and write the word handoff on that Post-it note. Slap it on the wall, and then ask the team, what would it take to fully hand off a project from the office to the field? And when I say have your team there, I'm talking about everybody that's on the pre-construction side, estimating, design, selections, pre-construction, and your construction team, project managers, superintendents, lead carpenters, not necessarily laborers and anybody who's in a leadership or management position. You want to have them in the room because you're going to design this process with their input. You're going to design their process. All right. So the first Post-it note says handoff. You put that on the wall. You ask the question, what would it take to fully hand off a project? And you get answers from the team. You write each answer on a Post-it note, stick it up on the wall, and you just do a brain dump of everything that you want to be in your pre-construction process. And this is an important distinction. This is not an exercise of documenting what you're doing now, because apparently it's not working. What you're doing is designing the process the way you want it to run. That's why you're asking the question, what would it take? Not what are we doing? What would it take to fully hand off a project? And get the team to say, you know, it'd be great if we had this, or it'd be great if we had this information, or if we did this. And then you slap these Post-it notes up on the wall. And the beauty of using Post-it notes is you can move them around and put them into sequential order. And after an hour or hour and a half, you should have a pretty good process laid out. And then before you're done, be sure to refer back to that list of problems that your team shared with you and say, what would it take to solve this problem? And bake that into your process and make sure that your process solves those chronic problems. Okay. So there's a lot more to that to unpack, but that's the concept of getting your team involved with designing your Nail the Handoff session. And the secret sauce to this, the reason it's so important to get them involved is that when you do it this way, it's their process. It's not your process. It's their process. And what we've seen over and over and over and over and over is people implement processes that they are part of developing. So if you want your team to implement a process, involve them in the development of that process. Okay. So I mentioned I'm going to give you some bonus chaos elimination hacks to consider including in your Nail the Handoff process. So we've taken 170 to 180 people through this process to date. And there are a few great ideas that I recommend you consider including in your process. Number 1 is client education. Let's set expectations with the client. Let's set expectations on how we're going to communicate. What is our process? Who should they talk to? What software are we going to use, etc. Educate the client on your process. Number 2 is to have, this may be the most important one, is to have a page flip review session. At some point during the pre-construction process, before you submit your bid, before you sign the contract, get the pre-construction team and at least somebody from the operations team, the project manager, the superintendent, to come in and flip through page by page of the project drawings, look for constructability issues, look for long lead items, and maybe even discuss proposed subcontractors. this heads off a lot of problems. Number 3 is to have a handoff checklist, and think about the handoff process a lot like a loan closing. Okay. If you've ever bought a piece of real estate, there's a list of stipulations, and you have to complete 100% of those stipulations, or you ain't going to close that loan. And that's how a project handoff should be. There's a handoff checklist of everything that constitutes a complete handoff, and you're not handing that project off until all of those boxes are checked. And lastly, if you're a custom home builder or remodeler, you need to get paid for pre-construction and estimating, and you need to consider switching to a pre-construction services agreement based sales process. So you get paid a premium for pre-construction and estimating. It's really the only way to properly nail the handoff. So there are a lot of other things that need to be done to support this process: clarifying roles and responsibilities, designing your strategic blueprint. There's a lot of other things that support the nail the handoff process, which we don't have time to cover, but we do go into great detail in all of that, cover all of that in our Systematize Your Construction Business program. So I want you to think about this. Think about what it will be like when there's an actual pre-construction process that everybody on your team is following. What's it going to be like when you start a job and you know exactly what's going to be built? You have a complete scope of work and you know how much it's going to cost. What's it going to be like when your field team, your lead carpenters, your superintendents, your foremen, your subcontractors have all of the information they need before they get started and they just have to build? What's it going to be like for your customer? What will the customer experience be like when all of the decisions are made early in the process and they can just enjoy the build? Well, that's what a lot of our clients have experienced when they've dialed in their pre-construction process and they started nailing the handoff from the office to the field. Schedule delays go away. They're finishing projects faster. They're making more money. There's less chaos. The team is happier. The owner's phone rings a lot less. The construction business owner's phone rings a lot less. Clients are happier, better reviews, more referrals, lots of good things. So if you'd like our team's help with this, then click the link in the show notes, or you can go to constructionleadingedge.com and click the button to schedule a call. So we're all about taking action here before we go. So here's my challenge for you. What is your 5-minute action item? What is one thing you can do that will take 5 minutes or less that will get you started taking action on this topic? Something from this episode. So I challenge you to take action. And before you go, if you've been enjoying the podcast or getting value out of it, then I've got a quick favor to ask. Could you take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and maybe a short review on the platform that you're listening or watching this podcast on? It really helps the podcast grow. It lets other people know what to expect. Plus, I love hearing your feedback. It means the world to me. So thanks so much. I appreciate you listening. My name is Todd DeWalt from constructionleadingedge.com, and I will see you next time. Hey, it's Todd. Before you go, if you own a construction business and you know you need to put the right systems in place, whether it's to be able to scale up, to be able to take a proper vacation, step away from day-to-day operations, if you know you need to make it more profitable, or even prepare it for a future sale, if you know you need to make some changes in your business, there are really only 3 options. I want to clarify this for you. Option 1 is do nothing. Keep doing the status quo. Same inputs, same results. Keep doing the same thing that you've been doing. Option 2 is to DIY it, to do it yourself. You can try to reinvent the wheel, piece together solutions from books and podcasts, hope that trial and error gets you where you want to go. In my experience, this is the path of most resistance. Or there's option 3, which is to find a proven system that delivers the results you're looking for. Think about it. It's sort of like when you sign up for software for project management or bookkeeping, you probably didn't try to code your own software, right? You found a system that works. So that's a proven system that gets you the results you're looking for. Well, if you're ready to systematize your construction business, we've helped hundreds of construction business owners implement our proven processes, including our Nail the Handoff pre-construction system. It works for home builders, remodelers, commercial general contractors, and trade contractors like electricians, plumbers, roofers. The first step is simple. Schedule a free business evaluation call with my team. Just click the link in the show notes to book your call. On that call, You'll walk away with clarity on the hidden root causes of your biggest challenges. You'll learn about the pitfalls that you want to avoid as you move forward with your business. And you'll walk away with a customized roadmap that you can follow to get where you want to go. This is not a sales pitch, okay? There's no pressure. We may not even talk about working together. You may not even hear about our program. This is all about evaluating your business. It's going to be the most valuable hour that you've spent working on your business in a long time. So don't wait. Click the link in the show notes to book your free business evaluation call now. And the last thing, if you've been enjoying this podcast and getting value out of it, I've got a quick favor to ask. Could you take a moment and leave a 5-star rating and maybe a short review on the platform that you're listening or watching on? It really helps the podcast grow. It lets other people know what to expect. Plus, I love to hear your feedback. It means a lot to me. Thanks so much. My name is Todd DeWalt from ConstructionLeadingEdge.com, and I'll catch you on the next episode.